Good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon, members and officials. Yes, Chair, we are at 2:30 in the next minute, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Everybody, good afternoon, members, honorable members. Good afternoon to all of you. We are going to start our meeting. First of all, let me just welcome Provincial Treasury. But before we do that, we will just ask the members to introduce themselves for the record. Good afternoon, members. You may introduce yourself. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee and officials attending the meeting. I'm Leon van Wyk, a member of this committee. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Benedicta van Minnen. I'm a member of this committee.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Peter Johnson, member of this committee.
Good afternoon, Noma French Mbombo, member of the committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Pat Lecker, member of this committee.
Is that everybody? So there's no apologies, Mr. Davids?
Chairperson, yes, through you, Chair, Member Nkondlo indicated an apology. She'll join the meeting later, Chair. So she will join us later during the course of the meeting, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Davids, our procedural officer. I see Mrs. Kluto also in the meeting, our senior procedural officer. Thank you very much for attending. I'm going to give over, I think leading the delegation is Mr. Smith, Deputy Director General, acting governance and asset management, to introduce his team. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. As Mr. Christians have indicated, I'm currently acting Deputy Director General for Asset and Management, also taking the portfolio as Provincial Accountant General. So I've got three officials that will support me and particularly do the presentation. It's Melissa van Niekerk. Melissa, if you're able to put on your face, okay. Jason Fekkelin and Nilam Zurams. So Jason and Nilam will do the presentation, Chair. But maybe as an introduction, we've looked at the brief, and you are particularly interested in going through the report of the Department of Education. So what we've done, Chair, to make it easy, as far as this discussion is concerned, is to run down in terms of the oversight of the committee, and then particularly the chapters that you've indicated you want to have a bit of more knowledge about. So that's chapter A to chapter F. What we've also done, Chair, particularly from chapter E onwards, we've also tried to give the committee a direction as far as the annual report of education is concerned, in terms of which page numbers you'll find certain information. So that is just to guide and to simplify the process. But if there's any other questions that you believe we're not covering, then you can direct the questions to myself and Melissa, and we will answer it. And if there are questions that we are not able to answer, we certainly will come back to yourself as committee. So that is just a short introductions. So if you can indicate if you're ready, then we can start with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith, for that introduction. Yes, I think we are ready, and thank you for availing yourself here on the team. And over to you, and we're really looking forward to this presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Jason, you can go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will start with the first part of the presentation. My name is Ilam Jurams. So just to start off, we just wanted to start with the oversight responsibilities of the committee as it relates to the annual report. The committee will be responsible for evaluating all the information that's included in the annual report. They will evaluate the financial statements of all the departments at a general and reflect on any of the key messages delivered by the AGSA. They will need to follow up on the prior SCOPA resolutions and identify if the organ of state has acted on those resolutions. The committee may ask for any additional information not specifically disclosed in the annual report to ensure the oversight responsibility is carried out. At the end of the public accounts process, the committee will then produce resolutions which must be given effect to by an organ of state. Now, when we look at the annual report process as well, National Treasury provides the guideline for provincial, national and provincial departments, and they also provide a separate annual report guideline for Schedule 3A and 3C public entities. The significant achievements, performance information, governance, human resources information, and financial information is all reported in the annual report. The information reported on includes the actual achievements in relation to plan targets and budgets, as published in the strategic plan, the annual performance plan of a department, the estimates of provincial revenue and expenditure, as well as the adjusted estimates document. The publishing of financial and non-financial information promotes accountability and transparency on the efficiency and effectiveness of government departments and improves trust and confidence in the government service delivery. The reported information must be accurate and balanced, reporting the successes and explaining the shortcomings. The entire annual report is reviewed by the Auditor General to ensure that information reported on in the annual report does not contradict the information that has been audited. On the next slide, we will just do a snapshot of where the annual report fits into the entire accountability cycle. And as I've mentioned on the previous slides, we're basically looking at the information stemming from the strategic plan, the APP, the budgetary process, your monthly information and eventually into the annual report process where we are seeing the picture for an entire year. On the next slide, we will be taking is a view of all the various parts that is made up of the annual report. So Part A covers the general information, Part B covers the performance information, Part C governance, Part D the human resource management, Part E the PFMA compliance report, and Part F is the financial information. So the next few parts, we've highlighted Part C, E, and F as was requested by the committee, and then Jason will be taking us through into more detail in Part C. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ilam. So with regards to Part C, it touches on the governance information that should be highlighted in the annual report. So important to note that the requirements in relation to the governance information all stems from the annual report guideline that has been issued by National Treasury. So what we did here was we looked at what the minimum requirements were. That doesn't mean that it's only limited to this. The department can provide further information as well. But in terms of the minimum requirements, this is what is expected in an annual report. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see it is where to find that information in the relevant annual report of the Department of Education as was provided by the committee to ourselves. So for the first part, we're looking at the introduction in terms of governance. So here we want to see is, does the department have a governance introduction that speaks to the standard of governance? So then we said yes, that information can be verified in the annual report by the committee. It is on page 126 of the annual report. And when you look at that, you'll be able to verify and confirm if it does cover all the bases in terms of what an introduction should have, and ensure that it adheres, or that the department adheres to the highest norms and standards in relation to governance. Then when we look at risk management, the first requirement is whether the department has a risk management policy and or strategy in place. Then in terms of that, the information in relation to risk management provided by the department in terms of whether they have a policy or a strategy in place can be verified on page 128 of the annual report. Then we're looking at whether the department conducts regular risk assessments to determine the effectiveness of their risk management strategy, and also to look at whether they have identified any new or emerging risks. So the risk assessment conducted by the department can be verified on page 129 of the annual report. And on there, you can confirm whether it is effective and whether the risk management strategy that has been put in place is adequate in terms of what is expected. Then whether there is a risk management committee that has been appointed by the department, and if that committee advises on the overall system in relation to risk management. Especially when looking at whether the mitigation is acceptable, is determined to be at an acceptable level in relation to risk. And then this advice provided by the committee or the establishment of the committee can be verified as well in the annual report. That is also looking at page 128 of that specific annual report, where you can confirm that there is a committee in place and what the overall system that has been reviewed by the committee is there. Then we're looking at whether the audit committee advises the department in relation to risk management, and if they perform their own independent monitoring of the risk management that is in place at the department, and also for them to advise on the effectiveness of that specific risk management system. So the advice and the monitoring of the audit committee itself can be verified in page 130 of the annual report. And this would confirm if the risk management process and systems at the department is effective according to the information provided by the audit committee. And then whether the department sees progress in risk management or management of risks, whether this has transmitted into improvements in the department's performance or not, and what plans has the department's put in place to address problems where risk is a major concern for them. Then the confirmation of the department's needs to be verified on page 131 of the annual report. And in this section, the department should address strategic risks identified and what sort of mitigation they have put in place to address those key risks. Then the next section in terms of part C speaks to fraud and corruption. So under this section, we would look at whether the department has a fraud prevention plan in place, and also whether that plan is being implemented and is effective. So in terms of what needs to be verified, so you'll first confirm the fraud prevention plan on page 131 of the annual report. And then also you need to look at, in terms of the information provided by the department, whether it is being or how it is being implemented by the specific department. In this case, Department of Education. Then the mechanisms in place to report on fraud and corruption and how these operate. For example, in terms of whistleblowing, the need for officials to make confidential disclosure about any fraud or corruption that they suspect. So you would want to verify that there is a mechanism that is used by the department, and that can be verified on page 131 of the annual report. And that is just where you confirm the policy or the processes that they put in place to address the procedures when it comes to fraud and corruption. And then how these cases are reported and what action is taken. I think this is also very important in terms of being able to verify that certain information is being kept confidential, and that there is a process where the department is recording and tracking and finalizing cases of potential fraud and corruption, that it's not just falling by the wayside. So this information can also be verified on page 131 of the annual report. The next section we're looking at speaks to minimizing any potential conflict of interest that arise. So firstly, here the requirement would be a description in terms of the process that is being implemented by the department to minimize conflict of interest, especially in relation to supply chain management. And then for the department, they would need to provide that description in terms of conflict of interest, and that can be verified on page 132 of the annual report to confirm what processes they have put in place to minimize any conflict of interest. Discuss the process followed where conflict of interest has been identified. So you would then need to confirm the conflict of interest process that has been put in place by the department on page 132 as well. Then when we're looking at the code of conduct, again, you need a brief description and the nature of the code of conduct or ethics and the effect it has. So is it effective in terms of what has been put in place? So then we look at the description in terms of the code of conduct that can be verified on page 132 of the annual report. And we will confirm that one is in place and it is effective in terms of the effect it has on the department itself. Then next we look at health and safety and environmental issues. And here we're providing a brief description on the nature in terms of health and safety and environmental issues and the effect that has on the department. Again, we're looking at what brief description the department provided, and that can be verified by the committee on page 133 of the annual report. And there you can confirm whatever issues has been identified and how it has been managed by the department. Then in terms of the portfolio committee, here we're looking at whether the committee exercises oversight in terms of service delivery performance of the department. So here the oversight of the committee needs to be highlighted to ensure that service delivery standards are maintained and implemented, and this also needs to be verified in terms of the annual report. Next section is where they need to provide commentary on matters raised by the committee and how the department plans or has addressed these matters. The commentary provided by the committee needs to be highlighted in the annual report, as well as what plans the department has put in place or has or is currently busy implementing, and that needs to be verified in terms of the annual report as well. Next, we're looking at the SCOPA resolutions. So here we indicate the dates that SCOPA meetings were held. And that needs to be confirmed on page 133 of the annual report, where you can also see how many meetings were held. Then in a tabular format, the resolution specific to the department, the details pertaining to the resolutions, the progress made by the department with regards to each resolution, and the status of the resolution as it stands when the annual report was published. And then this needs to be contained in page 133 of the annual report, where the committee can go and verify all that information in terms of the resolutions and the progress against those resolutions. Then when speaking to the modifications to audit reports, include a discussion on the mechanism put in place by the accounting officer of the department to resolve matters reported by the AGSA in the previous financial year. So here you would look at not only the discussions, but the mechanisms as well that the department has put in place to address those key concerns, and that can be verified on page 134. And this is just to ensure that the department is resolving any non-compliance related issues that has been raised by the AGSA. The next part speaks to the internal control unit. Here we're looking at discussing the work performed by the internal control unit throughout the financial year. And then this can be verified on page 135 of the annual report, where you can just see what sort of work the internal control unit has been implementing. This can also be linked to previous concerns that was raised above, where you feel the attention could be drawn to key risky areas type of thing. So it could be important to look out for that as well. Then in terms of the audit, internal audit and audit committees, here you're looking at the key activities and the objectives of the internal audit. And that can be verified on page 136 of the annual report. And then you're also looking at the summary of work done. And again, can be verified on 136 of the annual report. Here you also want to see that the work that has been done speaks to key risks and key concerns that has been raised by the department as well. The next part is key activities and objectives of the audit committee itself. Again, here the key activities of the audit committee needs to be verified on page 136 of the annual report. And then lastly, in terms of the attendance of the audit committee meetings by the audit committee members, you also want to verify that there is meetings that has taken place and there is a quorum when the meeting does take place as well, which is also important. The next part speaks to the audit committee report, and this, sorry, okay, no, it's fine. And this report must indicate that the audit committee adopted formal terms of reference. The confirmation that the audit committee has adopted a terms of reference also needs to be confirmed in terms of the annual report, and that can be found on page 137 of the annual report. The report must indicate that the audit committee is satisfied with its responsibilities. Again, you can find that confirmation in terms of the committee being satisfied with their responsibilities on page 137 of the annual report. The report must indicate the effectiveness of internal control systems. Again, here, the report addressing the effectiveness of that system can be confirmed on page 137 of the annual report. Again, you can tie the effectiveness of the internal control system back to the internal control unit, where they can add value to ensure that the system of internal control within the department is actually effective. Again, you can provide a summary of the main activities undertaken by the audit committee during the financial year, and you can confirm this main activities, and you can verify it on pages 138 and 139 of the annual report. Then in relation to BE compliance, you need to include, or the department needs to include in a tabular format, compliance with BE requirements as it is stated by the BE Act and determined by the Department of Trade and Industry. The required table, you can confirm that on page 140 of the annual report. Where the department has, or where there has been no or partial compliance with regards to the criteria as set out in terms of the BE Act, the department should include a discussion and indicate what measures has been put in place or taken to ensure that they do comply. This discussion in terms of where there was no or partial compliance can be verified on page 140 of the annual report. It is in the same table as the first requirement above. And then the key questions is listed there. These are the questions that goes in that specific table as indicated above. And that can also be verified on page 140.
Okay, Jason, can we just maybe stop there? Chair?
Sure.
This is quite a long presentation, so I don't know how you would like to drive this. We're quite comfortable. If there are any questions on part B, you know, part D, then we can actually respond to that. So, or do you prefer that we do the full presentation?
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to allow the members, if there's any questions to be asked, to ask some questions to give you guys a break. And that, so I'm just going to see if there's members that have any pressing issues and questions now, then I'm going to allow them now, and then we can just continue after that. Members? I don't see any hands. There's one hand, we just see. Yeah, Member Makondlo, I see your hand. You may ask your question. Thank you very much.
Oh no, Chair. I was gonna say maybe let's allow them to complete and just note our questions and ask once they are done.
Okay, no problem, Konda. Let's continue. Let's continue, Mr. Smith. I don't think there's any pressing questions now. Let's just continue, and then afterwards we'll ask the questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, committee. You can move to the next slide. So this is then part E that speaks to the PFMA compliance report. And firstly, we'll touch base in terms of irregular, fruitless and wasteful and unauthorized expenditure and any potential material losses that stems from it. So in terms of irregular expenditure, as it is recorded in the annual report, we need to look at the irregular expenditure that has been confirmed, irregular expenditure that is under assessment, under determination, or under investigation. We look at irregular expenditure that has been condoned by the relevant authority. We look at irregular expenditure that has been set for recovery or where it is deemed to be recoverable. We look at irregular expenditure where it's deemed not to be recoverable and it is written off. And we look at irregular expenditure that has not been condoned by the relevant authority, but has subsequently been removed by the accounting officer. In terms of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, we look at, again, the confirmed cases of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. You look at fruitless and wasteful expenditure that is under assessment, under determination, and under investigation. Fruitless and wasteful expenditure that is recovered or transferred to receivables for recovery. Fruitless and wasteful expenditure that is written off where it is not recoverable. And then you also need to provide details in terms of your current or previous year's disciplinary or criminal steps taken as a result of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And then lastly, unauthorized expenditure, as it is recorded in the annual report, we need to confirm, or we need to look at the confirmed cases of unauthorized expenditure, where it is under assessment, determination, or investigation as well. And then over here, irregular expenditure in terms of the Department of Education can be found on pages 176 to 178 of the annual report. And here we're just looking at the confirmation that irregular expenditure was disclosed and done in line with the annual report guide that was been issued by National Treasury. And that guide basically follows the steps as under the description below, where we have the opening balance, we add confirmed, we minus the irregular expenditure condoned. That is basically the outline that is provided by that guide. So this below is the reconciliation of irregular expenditure, and it's merely a summary of all the notes that follows below it. But it's very important that the amounts that is transferred to this reconciliation is transferred correctly from those notes below. So where, for example, you'll see irregular expenditure confirmed, there would be a note that speaks to irregular expenditure confirmed. So that's just to ensure that that amount is transferred correctly from that note below to this reconciling note. So with regards to the opening balance, obviously there we're looking at the comparative years total that has been provided, and we're just making sure that that opening balance speaks to the comparative years amount as it relates to irregular expenditure. Then there's this new concept in terms of irregular expenditure, where we're looking at restating the comparative year due to changes in reporting requirements. So basically what this indicates is where in the current year you have identified amounts that speaks to irregular expenditure, but it relates to prior years in terms of when the finances or when the expenditure took place. You will then restate your comparative year in terms of the opening balance that has been provided. So then you'll see below as restated. So that would be your opening balance and the restated amount as you determined in the second block. The next part you'll see where we add irregular expenditure confirmed. This is just all confirmed cases of irregular expenditure that has taken place in the financial year. What is important here for us as well is for the department to indicate that there is effective controls in place to address concerns when it comes to irregular expenditure, and what sort of disciplinary or remedial actions are in place to address non-compliance, and also for us to avoid repetition when it comes to irregular expenditure confirmed cases. Then when we speak to irregular expenditure condoned, this is an amount that reduces the overall balance of irregular expenditure. Again, this needs to be condoned by the relevant authority. That can be the accounting officer or provincial treasury in certain instances. And this amount we're also aiming to reduce as it has a direct correlation in terms of the confirmed cases as well. And in the province, we would ideally like to see a downward trajectory in terms of irregular expenditure. So therefore, we want to see a reduction in terms of confirmed cases, and this will lead to a reduction in terms of cases needing to be condoned as well. Then next, we have irregular expenditure not condoned and removed. So in this case, the accounting officer may, in terms of the PFMA compliance and reporting framework, remove irregular expenditure that was not condoned by the relevant authority. But what's important to note is that there is still certain requirements that the department needs to follow before they are allowed to remove irregular expenditure. So certain steps still needs to be put in place. The next part is irregular expenditure that is recoverable. Here, the department needs to first indicate whether there was a loss in relation to the irregular expenditure. And if they confirm that there was a loss, they need to put processes in place to recover that losses in terms of the PFMA compliance and reporting framework. And obviously, where there is an employee directly linked to that loss, that losses needs to be recovered from that employee, and they need to be given 30 days to pay in full or to make a reasonable arrangement in terms of installments of paying back the loss. Then irregular expenditure that is not recoverable and it's written off by the department. Again, the department first needs to follow processes to try and recover the losses, and where it is deemed unrecoverable, the department then needs to write it off in terms of the debts write-off policy that has been provided by National Treasury in terms of Treasury regulations. And then the closing balance, as it relates to irregular expenditure, it's just a balance of the opening balance plus the confirmed cases minus all the methods in terms of which you can follow to remove or reduce irregular expenditure. Then with regards to fruitless and wasteful expenditure, this is on pages 178 to 179 of the annual report. And again, we want to ensure that it is done in line with the annual report guidelines that has been issued by National Treasury. Again, this is a reconciliation that is provided below, and we need to ensure that all amounts that is put in the reconciliation is disclosed correctly and transferred to the recon correctly as well. The opening balance is again the same in terms of what I explained with regards to irregular expenditure, where we're confirming that the prior year balance has been transferred correctly. A restatement, again, is the concept that I explained earlier, where the changes with regards to reporting requirements was made. And here, any cases that relates to prior years and is confirmed in the current year needs to, the opening balance of the comparative year needs to be restated. And the restated is shown below that. Then we confirm or we add confirmed cases of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And also important to note is that we want to also see a downward trajectory in terms of confirmed cases of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. So we want to ensure that there are strong or sound controls in place and that disciplinary and remedial action is effective. Then next we have fruitless and wasteful expenditure that is made recoverable. Again, there needs to be a loss and an employee linked or responsible for that loss. And then they need to be informed within 30 days. to pay in full or to make arrangements to pay in installments as determined by the department. And then irregular expenditure that is not recoverable and written off. This must also be done in terms of the National Treasury regulations that has been provided. And once again, the closing balance is a recon between the opening, the additions and the subtractions as indicated in the table. Then unauthorized expenditure information. It is on pages 180 to 181. It follows the same process as well in terms of it needs to be done in terms of the annual report guidelines that was issued. The recon, the information below is a recon of all other notes that ties back into this main reconciliation note. And we need to verify that all amounts was transferred into this note correctly. Again, we have the opening balance, the restated amount, and then we speak to the confirmed cases of unauthorized expenditure. And this is again important to note that controls needs to be put in place to address any cases that does come to light. Then we see under subtraction, we're speaking to unauthorized expenditure approved with funding. So this basically means that the unauthorized expenditure approved as a direct charge against the relevant revenue fund by Parliament or provincial legislature. Then we have unauthorized expenditure approved without funding. So this means that it's not approved as a direct charge. This basically means that the department would need to put finances or make finances available from their own funds or their new allocation in the next financial year. Then we have recoverable and not recoverable and written off. It's the same concept as indicated previously. And then maybe just below, just to note that for the past 2 financial years, as indicated in this annual report, there was no unauthorized expenditure. There's not been any cases for the department at this stage. And then when looking at late or non-payment of suppliers, what is important here is that the accounting officer needs to maintain or put a system in place that will enable the tracking of invoices that they receive by the institution and also to track it up until the point of payment of those specific invoices. When it comes to what needs to be disclosed in the annual report, we would need to see that the total number and rand value of all the invoices that has been received by the department, the number and rand value of invoices paid within 30 days or within the agreed period with the service provider, then the number and the rand of all invoices paid after 30 days or a later period than what was agreed with the service provider. And then the number and rand value of all invoices that are older than 30 days or in excess of the period agreed with the supplier, which remains unpaid, and where such invoices are without dispute with the suppliers. And then the number of all invoices that are older than 30 days and in excess of the period agreed with the service provider, which remain unpaid, but there is a dispute with that service provider. And then just a narrative indicating the reasons for late or non-payment of those specific invoices. Okay, then with regards to where you can find this information, this is on page 182 of the annual report of the department. And then what we also wanted to highlight is it's important that the accounting officers needs to put that system in place in order for the department to settle all their contractual obligations and pay all monies owing to service providers, including intergovernmental claims. It also, in terms of Treasury Regulations 8.2.3 states that unless determined otherwise in a contract or other agreement, all payments due to creditors must be settled within 30 days from receipt of invoice, or in the case of a civil claim, the date of settlement or court judgment. And then this is just a small table of the key things that we want or that we would like to highlight for the committee. Is the first one, we have all the invoices that has been received, but key would be the invoices paid after 30 days or after the agreed period, because that is where the concern lies, mainly due to the fact that it is important for the department not to pay outside of the 30-day time frame. This also has a big impact on the private sector, especially smaller businesses where they are dependent on the funding or the financing to be paid within a reasonable time for them to make their books balance as well. And where this is a bit exorbitant, it also would be important for us to ask questions to the department as to what controls or measures is in place and whether it is effective, just to ensure that they adhere to this legislative requirement as well. Then in terms of the supply chain management information, we have two sections, procurement by other means. This is just where the accounting officer must ensure that all procurement by other means is reported in the annual report of the institution in the format as is prescribed in terms of the instruction on enhancing compliance, transparency, and accountability in SEM. And then we're looking at contract variations and expansions. Here, the accounting officer must ensure that all variations and expansions above the prescribed threshold needs to be reported in the format as determined in the instruction on enhancing transparency, enhancing compliance, transparency, and accountability. Procurement by other means. With regards to this section, there is a focus on all spheres of government in terms of the constitution, where we need to push for all 5 principles of SEM, namely fairness, equitability, transparency, competitiveness, and cost effectiveness. And then in terms of the National Treasury Instruction 3 of 21-22, that is the one that speaks to the transparency as indicated in the previous slide. Paragraph 4 states that the accounting officer may procure the goods and services required by other means if it is impractical to invite via a competitive bidding process, provided that reasons for such deviations are recorded and approved by the accounting officer. Procurement by other means includes limited bids, written price quotations that is not within the threshold determined by the National Treasury instructions or prescribed in terms of the department's SEM policy, and procurement that occurs in an emergency or urgent situation. For the Department of Education, we identified that procurement by other means totaled 4.6 million for the financial year. What is important for us to look at here is also to see if there's common commodities that is used by the department to procure by other means, because if there is a trend in terms of specific commodities, certain measures could be put in place by the department. And then also we need to look at the reasons for deviations or emergencies. And this should be provided to substantiate as to why it was not possible to follow a competitive bidding process. Contract variations and expansions. Here we're also looking at, in terms of exceptional circumstances, the accounting officer or their delegate may deem it necessary to expand or vary the scope of work in the original contracts. In terms of contracts, it can be expanded or extended up to 20%, or of the original contract value, or 20 million in respect of construction related goods and services, and 15% or 15 million in relation to goods and services, whichever is the lower amount. The department's contract variations and expansions should be reviewed against the mandate in terms of the legislative requirements pertaining to contract variations and expansions. And then it's also important for the department that they have strong controls in place pertaining to variations and expansions, and that this process remains transparent in order to mitigate any potential disputes that comes from this process, and that there would be no bias when we're looking at these variations and expansions.
Thank you, Jason. I'll be taking the members through part F, which is the financial information. So first, we're just going to look at what does an audit opinion mean. If you have a disclaimer audit opinion, it's the worst audit opinion that a department can achieve or an entity can achieve. Adverse is a negative opinion with opposing views. Qualified opinion is a negative opinion as well. Financially unqualified audit opinion with other matters. This is where your financial records and statements are fairly and appropriately presented, but there are, however, other matters that were reported on. And then finally, the clean audit status, which is your financially unqualified audit opinion with no matters reported on. That is your financial records and statements are fairly and appropriately presented, and there are no other matters that is basically reported on. So if we look at the next slide, we have just done a snapshot to show you that education for the last 3 years, which is starting with the 2022-2023 financial year, has received an unqualified opinion with other matters for the last 3 years as shown. And in this particular annual report of the Department of Education, you will find the audit opinion on pages 208 to 213. What I do want to highlight to the members as well is that the audit report covers 3 focus areas. So the auditors will provide their opinion on the audit of the annual financial statements. They will provide an opinion on the annual performance report, and they will provide an opinion on the compliance with legislation. In this instance, for more details, the members are welcome to have a look at the audit report under the page numbers I've indicated, 208, 213, to get more details as to why the annual performance information, there was a particular finding under that matter. So if we look at the format of the annual financial statements, this slide will cover exactly where we start with that process. We are guided by National Treasury. They provide us with the process in terms of the financial statements. It's in a Word version as well as in an Excel version, and this ensures consistency across the province for our departments. All our departments, the basis of preparation for the financial statements is based on the modified cash standard. This again is annually reviewed by National Treasury, and they do issue us with a framework annually as well. The first section first section that forms part of the annual financial statements is your appropriation statement and notes, and that can be found on pages 216 to 226, and that covers your budget versus your actual expenditure. It will include any reasons, causes, and non-delivery of service delivery related to over and underspending, and there will be an explanation of all of these things in part of the appropriation note. The next statement that we will be covering would be the statement of financial performance, which is on page 227. And again, this gives us a lot of total expenditure, total revenue, and with this framework, the departments are making use of, they are obviously on the modified cash version, so it will obviously exclude any accruals that is coming through. Year-on-year revenue and expenditure trends can also be then referred to in the notes, and any losses, debts, or theft written off can also be referred to in the notes. Your statement of financial position, which is on page 228, you can look at your assets and your liabilities from this particular statement. It will also provide us information around the aging. If you look at the notes, it will provide us on the aging of particular line items like receivables as well. The secondary information, which is information that does not form part of the first two statements that I had mentioned, but also is a critical part of the financial statements, can be discovered on pages 240 to 264. And all of this information, in the secondary information, it provides further information on the amounts and information that's disclosed in the annual financial statements. What also comes through in the secondary information is the contingent liabilities information, your commitments, your accruals, your provisions, an extract of your irregular expenditure that links into what Jason had mentioned under Part E as well, your key management personnel, your related party disclosures, your asset management, your tangible and intangible assets, as well as your fruitless and wasteful expenditure, which is an extract of what Jason had mentioned as well. When looking at accruals, especially those that are 30 days plus, members should look at the increase year on year and compare the accruals with the surplus for the department. Members should also look at to what extent the commitments are binding on the budget of that department for future expenditure. And then with reference to the irregular, Jason has already explained, I think, in full detail about the irregular expenditure line items. I will hand over to Jason to just take the committee members through the changes in the annual report guide.
Okay, thank you, Ilham. So there's just been a couple of changes in terms of the annual report guide that was provided last year versus the one that was provided for this financial year. And it was updated last in February of this year. And then just the following changes. All the changes relates to Part E of the annual report. And we just highlighted in terms of where, in terms of the guide that has been provided by National Treasury, on which pages of the guide you can find those changes. There is two separate guides that is provided, one for public entities and one for departments. With regards to the guide for departments, you can find the change on page 69, and it speaks to irregular information, irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, unauthorized expenditure, and material losses. And that firstly touches on the irregular expenditure disclosure note, the recon of irregular expenditure. So here the change speaks to the adjustment in terms of the opening balance and the restatement of the opening balance. So this is just that section that I mentioned earlier when I was going through that paragraph to say this is something new, where you can restate the opening balance with regards to irregular expenditure. And then below is just the changes as it relates to the reconciling notes as well. Then in terms of the next one, it's the same scenario in terms of the heading that has been changed or amended, where the details from the current or previous year of irregular expenditure condoned to the details of irregular expenditure condoned. So that is just a minor change to note C, and then a change to the disclosure note D. The heading of the note has been amended from the details of the current and previous year irregular expenditure removed and not condoned, and it currently reads now details of irregular expenditure removed and not condoned. So it just took out the words of current and previous, and it just says details of irregular expenditure removed. So you'll see these changes are fairly minor, but we just thought it would be important to highlight this to the committee as well. Then in terms of the disclosure note E, again, details of current and previous year irregular expenditure recovered, and then it now reads details irregular expenditure recovered to irregular expenditure recoverable. Okay, then in terms of disclosure note F, that is found also on page 70 of the guide provided, and the heading of the note was also amended from the current and previous year irregular expenditure written off to the details of irregular expenditure written off, and then in brackets irrecoverable. Then in terms of section E as well, this is just information on additional disclosure in relation to interdepartmental arrangements. This is disclosure note H, where the heading has changed from details of non-compliance cases, where the institution is involved in an inter-institutional arrangement. And this is just where such an institution is responsible for the non-compliance. It has been changed to the details where the details of irregular expenditure where an institution is involved in an inter-institutional arrangement. And then in terms of disclosure note I, the heading has been amended from details of current and previous year disciplinary or criminal steps taken as a result of irregular expenditure, just to details of disciplinary steps, disciplinary or criminal steps taken as a result of irregular expenditure. Then we move on to fruitless and wasteful expenditure, where the changes would be similar again, where we're looking at the adjustment in terms of opening balance, and it would now be opening balance restated. In terms of the reconciliation, it would be the same as was indicated under irregular expenditure, where it is now fruitless and wasteful expenditure written off to fruitless and wasteful expenditure not recoverable and written off. And that ties back to the reconciling notes as well. So when we're looking at the note B, which is found on page 73 of the guide, again, we're looking at the current and previous year, which was removed for note B. Note C, again, the current and previous year was removed. On note D, the same, current and previous year was removed again. And then note E, we're looking at the detail of the current and previous year as it relates to disciplinary or criminal steps. Again, we just remove those two words in relation to current and previous year. Then the next part speaks to unauthorized expenditure. As you can see, the trend is the same again, where we're looking at the opening balance as it is restated. So those are just some keywords that has been changed. And then in terms of the reconciling notes again, when we look at note B, the details of current and previous year again has been changed and removed. And then in the next section, when we're speaking to the additional disclosure in relation to material losses, and that disclosure note A, the heading of the note was amended from, again, the detail of the current and previous year, material losses through criminal conduct to the details of material losses through criminal conduct. So we again just changed the words from the current and previous year, which was removed. And then in disclosure note C at the bottom, the heading was amended from other material losses recovered to other material losses recoverable. And then the last one is, again, the heading was amended from other material losses written off to other material losses not recoverable and written off. Thank you very much. Just on another note for the committee, the presentation was made available. And in terms of the other parts, part A, B, and D, we have hidden the slides. But if you go through the presentation, you should still be able to view those slides as well. That's just a more high-level information that has been provided from our side to the committee as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we open for questions. As you could see, we wanted to make it more simplistic. You know, that it actually helps you in terms of analyzing education's report. We also just want to indicate, as Member van Wyk have indicated, it is 22-23, not 23-24, because at this point in time, you know, according to the protocol, it first needs to be submitted to the standing committees, and then afterwards it will be made available for the provincial treasury also to interrogate. but the annual reports are basically follow the same trend. So you would be able to just replace those page numbers that we've got for 22-23 as far as 23-24 is concerned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and thank you for your team for that comprehensive presentation. Members, I'm going to allow some questions if there's any. If there's any hands, then I'll take some questions now. I don't see any hands. I don't see any questions.
Chair.
Yeah, I can't see. I see a hand now. Okay, I see. Is it Member Petrus?
And myself,
Yes,
Chair.
yes.
Okay, can I get Member Petrus and then Member Lekker? I only see one hand, but Member Lekker, you're then after Member Petrus. Over to you, Member Petrus.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and colleagues. Chairperson, what is the latest or the cutoff date to comment on this report for us as members?
No, Mr. Member Petrus, this was only a presentation to take us through to prepare us for the annual reports. So there's no cutoff. It was a presentation from the Provincial Treasury to sharpen us. So when we go into the next month, into the the annual reports that we are, accustomed to what they are presenting. So that is where we are.
Chairperson?
Yes.
Yes, you're too quick for me. For that report, Chair, the cutoff date for...
No, there's no cutoff date. What Provincial Treasury has done was they took an annual report and they took us through the education just to gear us up and to give us whatever amendments and whatever we must look out for. So when we enter into October, into our 3 weeks annual reports, this was a presentation to assist us when we have those annual reports. So that was the briefing of today. And last week we had the AG, and also we had the audit committee briefing us on, what must we as a committee, our oversight role, what must we look at when we engage the various departments. Member Lekker?
Thank you, Chairperson. My apologies. I'm struggling to raise my hand on the gadget. Hence, I tried to scream. I sincerely apologize for that. Chair, let me welcome the presentation from the officials. I want to check in respect to a 30-day period that is meant for the payment of invoices. What then becomes what you call the consequence thereof, as some of the invoices may not be paid before 30 days or within a 30-day period. Are there laws preventing or laws promoting such? To Chair, I've heard there was mention made of service delivery in respect of clean audits versus service delivery. What is the norm and what is to be expected if there are services that have not been rendered due to reasons that are presented? What then becomes the consequence when the monies have been paid or have not been paid and yet services are not rendered? I just want to check on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Pat Lekker. Member Makondlo, you next.
No, thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. Chair, 2 questions. One, I think early in the presentation, I just want to understand the whole fraud prevention and, ethics environment. One, I think the presenter made mention that there is a tracking that gets to be done. Is the tracking done by the AG? Considering that in the presentation you mentioned, that there would have been either reports, check whether the reports were investigated and the likes. So I'm just checking whether during the annual report process, is the assumption that the department with entities are expected to provide the Auditor General with all of those within that financial year? And then does the AG, what mechanism is there to then verify that information as part of the tracking, verify, the legitimacy of that information and its relationship to the internal control environment? The second one, I think, is on the irregular expenditure or wasteful expenditure with funding. If you can explain more if and whether has there. Okay, let me not ask you because you're not AG. I just wanted to understand in the issue of waste. I think it's why am I losing this term now? Fruitless if it's not wasteful expenditure or irregular expenditure without funding. If you can explain that concept to me, and whether you spoke about Parliament having approved, and I'm not sure to what extent would Parliament be able during the audit process, pick up something that would have then emanated from the department which needed Parliament? Maybe just explain to me that process, because it's something that I heard as it was being explained, but I do not have much more insight about. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Mkondo. Mr. Smith, I'm handing over to you and the team. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll respond as far as possible, and then my team members can maybe just add where I've not given sufficient response. Just in terms of Member Lekker, the 30 days, and in terms of the consequence, as you'll see that it's also been put into the annual report recently. It was not always there. And it's basically to ensure that accounting officers in departments, there's accountability right through the process. So as far as the consequence is concerned, as a provincial treasury, we report on each and every department on a monthly basis to the National Treasury. And then the National Treasury in turn also then report to the Office of the President. So this whole 30-day payment is actually monitored at the presidential level. And of course, there are particular reasons for that. It is to ensure that as a government we adhere to our contractual obligations. And we also pay then companies accordingly, as Jason have indicated. We contract with service providers, and it's important that of course we adhere to our commitments. It also links up to the second question of Member Lekker as far as clean audits are concerned. Maybe just to link the 30-day payments. Of course, payment can only be made if the service providers have adhered to the contractual obligations. So within departments, there needs to be a process to ensure that that they don't pay for services that has not been rendered. So if that's the case, of course, it will be picked up by the AG, and it will be regarded as irregular expenditure where you pay for services not delivered. And of course, if that's the case, you will forgo your clean audit status. And that is just to ensure that we spend money effectively, and also for services that's been rendered. In terms of the fraud issue that was raised by Member Nkontle, Member Nkontle in the province, and you might be aware that we've got a particular process. So, for instance, we've got on a centralized level, we've got a forensic audit that falls under the auspices of the Department of the Premier, and any fraud case is actually investigated by the forensic auditors. And in each and every session of the audit committee, there's also a report that's submitted to the audit committee in terms of if any cases has been identified, and what is the progress as far as that is concerned. Of course, the AG has access when they audit departments to all of this information, but we're not necessarily disclosing that information. That is information for the accounting officer, and then of course it depends on whether the accounting officer also want to disclose that to the committee if so asked. But a lot of that information is confidential, and quite a number of the cases is under investigation. Fraud cases takes quite some time to be finalized. Of course, there are also areas where if fraud has not been identified by the department, it might be identified by the AG, and the AG will then also on a continuous basis, once they've raised these issues, follow it up with the department. As far as the irregular expenditure is concerned, Member Nkondlo, and your last comment was unauthorized expenditure. I'm going to try to explain it to you, but as I've indicated, the team can also add to it. So as far as irregular expenditure is concerned, there is a process, there is a guide in terms of how to handle irregular expenditure. Previously, the condonement was only with the Provincial Treasury. So the Provincial Treasury has a committee that deals with irregular expenditure. But last year, the National Treasury have also revised it, which means that accounting officers also have the power to condone irregular action. So once that irregular expenditure is incurred and it's condoned, it then needs to be written off against the baseline of the department. So that is where there's irregular expenditure with funding. So as far as the unauthorized is concerned, it's basically unauthorized is where you spend money that was not appropriated for. So basically, and hence it needs to go to the legislature, also to condone the unauthorized expenditure. No department has the right, or even the Provincial Treasury, is to condone unauthorized expenditure because the budget is being appropriated. It goes through a parliamentary process. And if it's unauthorized expenditure, it needs to go to the same process. I'm not sure, Melissa, Ilham, and Jason, whether there's anything that you would like to add to my comments.
No, Isaac, I think you covered us all, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith, for that. Is there any other questions? All the questions that would be posed was answered by Mr. Smith. I see no other hands. I see now a hand. Member Van Wyk, over to you.
Yes, Chair. Thanks very much. I think I don't have any questions relating to the presentation. However, I've just got some questions relating to the process that we as committee will need to be following over the next few weeks. And I think as committee members will no doubt be aware, we have these meetings taking place on a daily basis for 3 to 4 weeks during October, from a Monday to a Friday on many occasions. And I'm just trying to determine and find out whether all of these meetings are going to be in person or whether they are going to be online meetings. And I ask that because of my concern in those of us who need to travel to get to Cape Town. And as with some of the meetings today, we were told that it was going to be an in-person meeting, and then I travel from George to Cape Town, only to be told that we are now having a Teams meeting. So in other words, I'm traveling from George to Cape Town to come and hold a Teams meeting. So, you know, I'm concerned about the costs that are being incurred. And, you know, for those of us who have to travel, we've got to get prior permission
Member Van
attend.
Wyk, can I just interject? We will do this after we release Provincial Treasury. So that we usually do in committee, and that we usually do when the department leaves. So that we will discuss just after this. But I just want questions to the Provincial Treasury. If there's no questions for them, we can release them, and then we can get into the discussions that you are referring to.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Is there any closing remarks, Mr. Smith, before we release you? Because I see there's no more hands.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Just to indicate that, you know, we're privileged to provide information to the committee to assist them in performing their functions. As I've indicated with my opening remarks, if there's anything else that the committee is become aware that we need to give a bit of more information, we're quite comfortable if you call on us again. But yes, just thank you to my team as well, and then also to the committee members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much to you and your team. I think it was an excellent presentation. And thank you very much. We do appreciate your time that you spent with us. You may now leave the meeting. Thank you. Yes, members, everybody has now left the meeting, and now we can just get into our own business. But let me just go on the agenda, and then I will address Member Van Wyk after this. Is there any resolutions or anything that you want to ask Provincial Treasury after this? The idea with myself and the procedural officer was to get them in just to prepare us for the meetings of October. So, you know, some of the members that's in Provincial Parliament for the first time, some of our members come from National Parliament, some of our members is aware of what's happening, but we just thought, you know, giving the members that presentations will assist us going forward for next month. So thank you very much. I'm just checking the chat box. There's stuff has been answered. Mr. Davis, there's no SAPAC matters. I've received nothing. Did you receive anything from SAPAC?
No, Chair. There's no SAPAC matters, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can we just before we do the minutes, Member Van Wyk raised quite an important question. Member Van Wyk, I'm going to now just speak on that matter. I spoke to the procedural officer and I said, definitely, we cannot have all our meetings in person. We just come out of a meeting where, you know, and you don't want, the problem that we have is departments, they come in the morning for the standing committee, and then they stay for the afternoon for scoper meetings. So we will have to coordinate and see if a committee, if a department comes in the morning and in the afternoon. I want to coordinate that, but I can assure you, I've spoken to the procedural officer. We'll still speak more, but I believe most of our meetings will be online. Majority of them will be online, and I'll speak to the committee as well. But let us just speak to, I want to have a meeting maybe with the Chief Whip and maybe the Speaker to see how do we coordinate it. But I think for cost-saving matters, especially you that travel so far, I don't think, and it's not going to be worth our while if you travel all the way for one meeting, go back, and the next day is so we'll have to work it out. But I can assure you that we have spoken about it, and most of our meeting, if not all, will be online. So I don't have you a direct answer, but what I can say is most of our meetings will be online. We'll check with how the other standing committees, you guys, with education, because education is quite a big department. Sometimes it's good to engage them, because they are so a large department. The same with health is quite a large department, and that is maybe what we'll have to talk about. Some of the chairpersons here, myself, we'll just have to talk and see how we can, make use of it and not let members travel in for so long and then leave again. So we will look at that. But like I said, by next week we should give clear indication. The procedural officer will have to give. He'll give clear communication how we're going to go ahead with that. Mr. Davids, I see your hand is up.
Yes, Chairperson. Chairperson, if it's not too forward of me, is it fine if I can just highlight on the screen, just reflect the latest schedule that we have for the annual report session, Chairperson, starting on the 7th of October. Is that fine with you, Chair?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. I'm just screening it for you, Chair. Chair, so this is the program, Chair, that has been developed, Chair, after the Chief Whip has discussed and liaised with the different ministries and with the HODs of the different departments, Chair. So, Chair, it's from Monday, the 7th of October, Chair, and Chair, it goes till Tuesday, the 29th of October, Chairperson. And Chairperson, as you've indicated correctly, Chairperson, that you are looking to engage with the Chief Whip, Chairperson, but then also not all of the meetings, some of the meetings, Chairperson, having it online, virtual, Chair. And then some of the big departments, Chair, perhaps in-person, Chairperson. So, Chair, since the last conversation, Chair, I've basically just highlighted some of the most important departments which might be considered as important, Chair, which might be the Department of the Premier. We have the Department of Infrastructure, which is vital, the Department of Social Development, and these are all potential in-person meetings as highlighted in yellow, Chair. We've got the Western Cape Education Department, the Department of Mobility, and then Health, Chairperson. And then all the others will be after you've consulted with the Chief Whip, Chair, and you have gotten back to the committee and myself. Basically, maybe there will be a change to this that's highlighted in yellow, Chair. But this is what we're basically looking at, Chairperson, that once the standing committee meets in the morning on the vote, then SCOPA will meet exactly the afternoon on the same vote, Chair. So it will be 8 till 1, for example, on the 7th for the Department of the Premier. There will be an hour break between 1 and 2, and then 2 till the end of the meeting. It will be with the Public Accounts Committee and the Department of the Premier, the Auditor General, and the Audit Committee, Chairperson. So that's the order that we're looking at following, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there any? Thank you very much. That is what we've discussed. Members, is there any comments on this? That is the thinking going forward. Is there any comments? And like I said, we want to be wise. And also be very considerate for members. And like I said, by next week, we should have a clear indication to which meetings is going to be in the chamber and which not. But as Mr. Davids pointed out, that is the big departments we thought about, and the other departments will all be online. Can we leave it? Will you leave it with me for next week? Or is there any comments, members?
Chair, that's fine by me. If you know, I'm sure you will be dealing with it as soon as possible, because this whole process of you know, gaining approvals and making arrangements is a fairly complex exercise. And you know, as I say, I'm very cost conscious as well, that we are not spending money where we possibly did not need to have to go and incur those expenses. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members. I will get back to you as soon as possible. I will sit with the procedural officer again, and we will have the necessary meetings and get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much, members. Can we go over to the minutes of the 18th of September, Mr. Davids? So that is just the names. Just make sure that your name is there and apologies are there. It's just the names of the members present. Thank you very much, Mr. Davids. You can continue.
So, sorry, Chairperson. Sorry, my mic was muted. Yes, Chairperson, everyone was in the meeting, Chair, including some of our alternate members, Chair. And then basically, Chair, it was just there were just some apologies. Member Petrus indicated that he has to leave early to attend the NCOP. And then, Chairperson, basically just a rundown that the committee was briefed by the Auditor General and the Audit Committee, Chairperson, on the annual report, Chairperson. And then basically, Chair, basically you have given feedback on the SAPAC matters, Chairperson, that of the attendance of the delegation that attended the SATCO-PAC meeting, Chair. And then the minutes of the 14th of August was approved last week by the committee. Chair, then just for resolutions and actions, Chair, there was basically just one request, Chair, request for information from the Chairperson of the Audit Committee of the Western Cape Education Department, that the Chairperson basically just give a update on the outcomes of the audit findings of the last financial year, Chair. That communication has been sent to the Chairperson, Chair, for his response, Chair, and it has been requested that he send us a response by next Friday, Chairperson, which once that response has been received, it will be forwarded to all of the members for their information and for their noting as well, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Davids. Is there any other matters, Mr. Davids, that we intend to? I think that is the end of our meeting.
That's the end, Chair. It will be appreciated, Chair, if we maybe just received a mover and a shaker for this minute, Chair.
That's great. I just thought about that. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for the minutes, please? Are we going to sit till tonight and get a
yes, I will second,
thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, Member Van Wyk. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Chairperson.
Thank you, Petrus. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. That's it. Thank you. You've got it, Mr. Davids. Member Leon Van Wyk and Member Petrus is a seconder. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members. Thank you for attending the meeting, and thank you for your participation. The meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Bye-bye.